Hello, and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we'll travel back in time to the 56th Academy Awards, which awarded the films of 1983. Bruce Beresford crafted a quiet 90-minute character study about a faded country star in Tender Mercies, which, despite its small scale, made a big impression with Oscar voters. The film scored 5 nominations in all and took home 2 wins, including Best Actor for Robert Duvall and Best Original Screenplay. But when it came to Best Picture, the box office phenomenon Terms of Endearment was too big to fail, as it took home the Oscars for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, and more. So why did Tender Mercies come up short in the end? We'll explore all this and more as we discuss how the Oscar almost went to Tender Mercies. Welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I am your host, Kevin Jacobson, and today I have another returning guest. You last heard him way back in 2014, extolling the virtues of boyhood, while also, talking some smack about Birdman. Welcome back, the host of the Not Her Again podcast, Michael Domanico.
Hello, thank you for having me back for just such another great episode where we love both the movies so equally.
Exactly.
I'm just getting all the hits.
Yep. So today we are talking about 1983, and that means that I and many others believe the runner-up to be Tender Mercies. Now, we'll get into why some people feel that another movie might be a runner-up in the Oscar segment, but for now, let us talk Tender Mercies, the movie that...
Let's do it.
Let's jump on in. Okay, so this was the runner-up to, of course, Terms of Endearment. And so let's get into a quick summary of Tender Mercies. It is a character drama about a washed-up country star named Max Sledge, who finds himself in a motel where he develops a relationship with the motel owner, Rosalie.
Develops is like a strong word for
we will get to that. Develops this relationship with Rosalie, and she is a widow with a young son. And so we gradually start to learn more about Mac's past, including that he was formerly married to a fellow country star named Dixie, with whom he has a daughter, Sue Ann. So essentially the film is all about Mac just trying to reform himself, battle his alcoholism, grapple with the ramifications of his past relationship, and basically just try to be a better person for his new wife. And so the film was directed by Bruce Beresford, who of course we know from being snubbed a few years later of Best Director for Driving Miss Daisy. And the film was written by Horton Foote, who also has a pedigree of his own because he wrote the film adaptation to Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
So the film stars Robert Duvall as Mac, Tess Harper as Rosalie, Alan Hubbard as the son, who is named Sonny, Betty Buckley as Dixie, a young Ellen Barkin as Sue Ann, and Wilford Brimley as Harry, the music manager. So, Tender Mercies made $8 million at the box office. Not great, Bob. And was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, winning 2 of them, but not Best Picture. So, Michael, let us talk about your favorite movie of all time, Tender Mercies.
Yeah, because when you think, Michael Domanico hosts a podcast about Meryl Streep and Julia Roberts, you think, let's bring him on for that Tender Mercies episode, because he's going to have some hot takes on Bobby Duvall over here. Tender Mercies, it is... I have to say, I've now seen it twice because I watched it for the original Meryl Streep season of Not Her Again that we did. because we were doing 1983, and I watched it again last night for your podcast. And the second time it actually was a little bit better, I think, because I knew what it was. I think maybe if you had, when you haven't seen it and then you watch it and you're like, oh wow, like nothing happened over the course of 90 minutes. It's a little like, what? Like, why did this movie have so much traction? Like, why was it the runner-up? Why does it win Best Actor and Best Original Screenplay? But I think the second time I kind of liked how quiet it was. It's not my particular favorite, but I liked kind of just how it was just, maybe having seen Crazy Heart, it felt like a better version of Crazy Heart. Because I hadn't seen that the first time around. And then I watched Crazy Heart and was like, ooh, I do not like this. And then I watched Tender Mercies and was like, honestly, I'd rather it be this. I'd rather it just be quiet, very nice cinematography, kind of no plot. It is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. So this was one of the few times that I had not seen the runner-up that I am covering beforehand. Saw it for the first time just yesterday.
Yeah.
And yes, it's a tight 90 minutes, which is good, in and out, you know. We don't always get that at the Oscars. Lots of big bloated epics.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
it was very much the Lady Bird of 1983, is I think what people are calling it, you know?
As so many people have said.
Yeah.
But it is a very quiet, subtle, plaintive movie. It's like a tumbleweed going through a ghost town, basically.
Yep.
It is just like, you know, doesn't overstay its welcome. It's just doesn't make a big fuss. It is what it is, and it's in and out, like I said. So I did not particularly enjoy watching this film. For like you were kind of suggesting, for the first time I really was kind of wondering where it was going.
There's a lot of anticipation because you're like, oh, this must be building somewhere, and then it's like, oh no,
nope.
You're like, okay.
just gonna be on this even plane for the whole time.
Yeah.
I mean, Robert Duvall gives, I think, a very understated and stoic performance.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm being generous. I thought he was very good in the film. I don't know if this is Oscar-winning material, to be honest, but we do know that this was a bit of a career Oscar for him after I think this was his like 5th nomination.
Yeah, and he had been around since To Kill a Mockingbird, so it was like, you know, he's getting to the point where it's like, just on the next try, just give me the Oscar. Like, please.
Yeah.
I come every year.
Yes. What more do you want from me?
Yeah.
Yeah. But his character is very interesting because I feel like we get all these suggestions that he has this violent past, especially that he had with his relationship with Dixie, which was like very violent, like domestic violence, almost to the point of killing her, from what we understand.
Which he admits to.
Yeah.
He said, like, when the daughter confronts him, he's like, yeah, I tried it. And she's like, why? And he's like, I don't know, I was drinking. You're like, what?
Yeah, but super casual, just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
But like, my issue is that when I'm watching this film, I don't get the sense of like this guy being this super violent alcoholic person. I know that this is like supposed to be in the aftermath of that portion of his life, but to me he just seemed like a really chill guy for most of it. I feel like the story is telling us things that Robert Duvall is not doing. You know?
Yeah, and I think that I'm going to steal slightly from what my friend Catherine said about this movie and The Big Chill, both of which are nominated this year, which is like, they're movies that rely a lot on like things that happen before you actually start watching action unfold. Like a lot of the action happens off screen beforehand. And I think that this movie does a lot of that. And I think that it can be, it's not, I don't want to call it like lazy almost, but it's just like, it's an easy way out when you don't want to have something come through in a performance, when you're like, we'll just explain it through like kind of a line of exposition of like, oh, and by the way, like one time this thing happened to him. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, it's just like all these little character building things that are like, yeah, you didn't see this, but don't worry, trust us, it happened. Totally. So I feel like I feel like this movie like traffics in that a lot of like,
that is fair.
We don't want to show you anything. We'll just like tell you little tidbits as we go throughout this like 90-minute movie where it's very quiet.
Right. That is exactly what I was feeling after watching this movie, is that I feel like the more interesting things about this guy's life happened before any of this.
Yeah, no,
Like
totally.
everything that has to do with his ex-wife
Mm-hmm.
and daughter, I feel like is way more engaging to me than whatever he's doing with his new wife, Rosalie, who
Yeah.
I also don't feel gets too much of a personality, to be honest. I feel like a lot of it is just her reacting to him.
And then even the stuff that happens on screen, where it's like he wakes up in this motel and then they start this relationship, like from A to B, from like where they start the relationship to where they like get engaged and then get married, like whatever, you like miss all of the like interim stuff where they're like
I
falling in
know.
love. And like her
Yeah.
telling him to like stop drinking, which like again is explained as like kind of an off-screen thing when she's like, "Yeah, don't worry, he just did." And you're like, "Why didn't I see any of it though?" Like the movie was happening at that point, and I like still didn't see it. It's just
Yeah.
like a really weird movie where you feel like you keep missing the best parts, and then they just plop you into a part where it's just like him playing his guitar, and you're like, "Okay."
Yeah.
It's very weird.
Yeah, like I was checking the time at it was literally the 10-minute mark in the movie where he's like, "Would you be my wife?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, "What?"
Yeah, he's like, "You ever think about getting married again?" She's like, "Yeah, I guess." And
Yeah,
he's like,
kind
"What about me?" And she's like, "Yeah, maybe." And you're like, "What?"
of. It's just
It's
like,
so strange because all
yeah,
you've really seen up to that point is that he's like a like raging alcoholic, and she's like seen him like fight with people over like the last drop of alcohol, and that's like all she's seen. And then he's like, "Do you want to get married?" And she's like, "Yeah, whatever."
yeah, I'm into that.
And you're like, "Man, I get that they live in an isolated town, but like she could probably do a little bit better, you know?"
Right. Yeah, and like I guess he's like helping around the motel a bit, which is appealing,
I
maybe. I
guess.
don't know.
Yeah.
And also, we do get her more of her story, which I also feel like is a bit of a flat line all the way through, which is just that she is this widower. Her husband died at the age of 20 in the war.
Hmm.
There doesn't seem to be a sense of how he died. And that question just keeps getting brought up over and over and over again throughout the film without too much of an evolution there. Um,
Yeah. Like weirdly for a movie that loves telling you like previous tidbits about things that happened with the Vietnam stuff, they're like, "Yeah, don't worry about it." And you're like, "No, I want to know more about that." And they're like, "I don't know, they just found him dead, like who knows?" And you're like, "Wait, what?" Like there's nothing else. And I don't know, it's like bringing in this like weird thread almost of like obviously they're just setting it up so that Robert Duvall can become the father figure to Sonny to be like, "Oh, don't worry, he's dead." But like it's
yeah.
almost like this really like interesting and like anti-war thing that is like sort of brought up where you're like, "Oh wow, like that's really unfortunate that they don't even tell the widow or the son like what happened to the husband." Like
Yeah.
obviously they must have some idea. And like there's kind of this like really interesting thing going on, and then it's like not really explored. They just keep bringing it up to be like, "Yeah, what a mystery, huh?" And you're like, "What?"
I
Like I
guess
feel like
so.
there's
Yeah.
something really interesting here that you're like not getting at, you know?
Yeah. You just want him to keep digging and it literally never
Yeah.
happens. So
Exactly. Like you want it to almost turn into this weird like procedural where they're gonna find out what happened to this guy. And it's just like,
yeah,
nope.
that's kind of the sense that I got that it was heading towards.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then the credits rolled. So
And I almost thought, and I knew where it was going the second time, but for whatever reason, I was like, I almost feel like the second time watching it, it almost feels like they're setting it up to be like, by the way, he was never actually in Vietnam. That's just like the story that they're telling the kid.
right. Yeah, that
And
would be
there's
interesting.
almost like hints at that where like the kids keep asking, they're like, "Isn't it weird that you don't know how your dad died? That they just say he was in Vietnam, but they don't say how it happened, like whatever." And the kid's like, "No, I don't know, whatever." And like they keep setting it up to be this thing, to be this revelation of like, no, he was a drunk or something, or he like just got into a car crash or something.
Yeah, that would have
But
been
like
super
they
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, but they don't bring it there. And you're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay."
Yeah, it's just kind of peters out once again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm coming to this revelation that it's so interesting that you were on the Boyhood episode because this is some of the things that people criticize Boyhood about.
Hmm.
This idea of not necessarily showing the big moments in Mason's life,
Hmm.
kind of filling in with the ordinary moments. Just something interesting there. But I do think that Boyhood does a much better job of making those moments more interesting than this does.
Yeah, I think just Boyhood does a lot with the small moments, you know?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
just thinking back to like the scene where she marries the new guy who also has his own kids, and then he's like freaking out about something at dinner and he throws the plate. Like, is it I mean, it's a big moment, obviously, but it's also like there's so much being said in that one scene about like every person's dynamic to each other,
Right,
and like
exactly.
all of the relationships, like not just, oh my god, this guy's crazy, but also like Patricia Arquette's relationship to her children, and then the relationships between the children, like all these things, like so much is being said in that small moment. Whereas like this movie, I feel like doesn't have that kind of, even in those smaller moments of just like
Right.
this thing happens. Like there's not a lot of weight to it unless it's like also explained of like, yeah, and this thing happened when I tried killing your mom, and you're like, what? Like it just feels like in Boyhood a lot of the action does a lot of the explaining, and in this they just have to keep relying on like people just like
Exposition.
divulging
Yeah.
little bits of information as you go
Yeah.
along, like little breadcrumbs, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a odd little movie.
Yeah.
The more I think about it, it's a interesting way that it's kind of teased out and then never. Anyway,
Yeah.
I
Also, one of my
found
like hottest takes on this movie is that it's a movie that like uses 3 different car crashes, even though there are like 20 people living in this town. There's the car crash that ends up killing his daughter. There's a car crash that he talks about earlier that like he narrowly avoided death once. And then there's like maybe it's 2.5. Then there's like that time where he like almost drives those cars off the road when he's like maybe gonna abandon this new family and like maybe go back to drinking. And he like does it very aggressively driving into people. So I'm like, wow, this movie has like a lot of car crashes. Like it uses that a lot. And there are like 4 people in this town. Like there are literal tumbleweeds going, and you're like, what?
yes.
Like this is the device that you keep using?
Yeah, very interesting. It's like it reminds me of like the Murder She Wrote thing where everyone keeps getting murdered in this town. Like what is
Exactly.
going on here?
Yeah, at a certain point you're like, people should just move, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. So I found the most interesting aspect of this entire film to be a supporting character, which
Sure.
is Dixie,
Yeah.
the ex-wife played by Betty Buckley, who I really think gives this film an extra spark that it desperately needs.
Yeah. Whenever she comes on, she's amazing.
Yeah.
You're really gripped by what she's doing. And sometimes it's just singing and then a little bit of fighting with Mac because he'll be at her show or something, but
Exactly.
she's just incredible.
Yeah. And the song, which gets nominated, Over You, is a very good song. It's good belting Betty Buckley song that
Yeah.
it's the one song from the film that's actually somewhat memorable.
Oh, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Like the other ones, you're like, they all just blend because they all kind of sound the same. When she's singing, you're like, okay, this is good. Like this is actually a bop.
Yeah. And there's this point where Robert Duvall is in the audience watching her, and eventually he just like gets up to leave, and I'm like, could we like stay with her?
I know, right?
We don't have to follow him out, This is a good performance.
Yeah. Like she just has a really interesting story because she has the much better movie because
Right,
she was
exactly.
like married to this abusive guy, and she gets out of the marriage, she takes the kid, and she ends up having this crazy successful music career to the point where all of her music royalties go to her daughter's trust fund, and her daughter like never has to worry about money. Obviously, like
Yeah.
the cost of living in this small town Texas isn't like very high, but at the same time, like she seems to be doing very well. And she has this like beautiful house that you see later on. And she just has this like really interesting story of like this woman that really pulled herself up by her bootstraps and like did what she had to do.
Yeah.
And like that's the interesting story. And like
Mhm.
we focus most of our 90 minutes on Mac.
Right. And it did remind me in slight places of A Star is Born a little bit, especially the 76 and, of course, 2018 version.
Yeah.
Of course, it's set in this sort of country-ish sort of vibe. And also, it is about this guy who is very washed up and this woman who has clearly had a very successful career, and he does not seem to be fully over it. And, so it's like a weird, bizarro version, some off take on A Star is Born in a way that I would find really interesting if like half of the screen time was focused on her, and they did a little balancing act there. But
yeah, it's like A Star is Born if the like female protagonist realized like I have to get out of this relationship instead of I have to ride this one out and see how it goes.
Exactly.
Like, it's like very, that A Star is Born
very
juncture.
Progressive. Yeah.
It's like there came a point for this person to be like, okay, no.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the pacing of this movie also is a little odd to me. Like I said, like the fact that only 10 minutes into the movie we get this marriage proposal.
Yeah.
I don't know how much time has passed at that point. Presumably enough time for them to develop this relationship. Things kind of keep slowing down and speeding up again throughout this film that I kind of found to be very uneven and
The time
unsettling.
jumps are confusing because
Yeah.
it's like you're saying, you're never totally clear because like things happen to them like personally where you're like, oh, that must have developed over time. But then you're like, I don't know, maybe it's been a month. And then they like put a record together. Like he puts a record together with some guys that he's met in town. And you're like, well, that would probably take a while. I think it should take at least a few weeks, but like it's super unclear. It feels like it happens like just like day to day. I don't know. There are a lot of like time jumps where obviously the kid isn't aging though, so you're like, well, I guess it's all been
Right.
within the same amount of time. But it's like very confusing because there's enough happening like personally in their personal developments where it could be like a year, 2 years maybe, but like it feels like it might also just be a very long week, and you like can't totally be sure.
Yeah, I still don't know, honestly.
Yeah,
I couldn't even tell you the time frame of this film.
yeah. I don't think they
So,
know.
yeah, it's just a indistinguishable amount of time. Time doesn't matter. Time is a flat circle. So, what I actually found interesting from the Max storyline,
Mm,
just to be a little more positive,
sure.
is when the daughter comes.
Yeah, Ellen Barkin is great as his daughter.
Yeah, she really is. She's very luminous, as
Yeah.
they say, you know.
And she's just like this very tragic figure who seems to be making the mistakes that her mother made, getting with this guy who it's
Right.
a slightly different mistake. Like, obviously, Robert Duvall was abusive. Like, her husband seems to be more just like mooching off of her, but still not like, what her mother wants her to end up being. So
Right.
it's a very interesting, almost like tragic character who wants to like really reconnect with her dad. And even though like you presume the mom has been trying to vilify this man for the past like 10 years, she still is really seeking out this connection with him. And she's just a very like complicated character. Who
Yeah.
then of course they kill off because we can't have complicated characters.
Which is a whole other thing. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the like 9 car crashes. You're like, oh, okay. I guess one of them took her.
And I wonder if like that, the fact that there are so many is like a weird way of trying to make it like some sort of foreshadowing of
Yeah.
something. Like clearly something's gonna happen with a car to one of these
It's
characters.
like
Uh-oh.
Chekhov's car. It's like pay
Exactly.
attention to this. And you're like, okay.
That's one way of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I did really like the scene where she does come back, and that
Yeah.
is, I feel like, the emotional center of the film is when she confronts him, talks about this hymn that he sang to her as a kid.
Hmm.
He kind of suggests that he doesn't really remember it, and then after she leaves, he sings it to himself quietly out the window, which I found to be for me, the most affecting part of the film.
No, I completely agree. Like when he says he doesn't remember, and then the next scene or whatever he's singing it, you're like, oof. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't know I cared this much about Mac, but all of a sudden I just feel like a knife going through my heart.
So there you go. Yeah. Um, yeah. So there's a lot of Christian imagery, a lot of biblical
Mm,
references throughout this film. The titular line comes from Rosalie, who's talking about her blessings and tender mercies
mhm.
that she says to her when she's praying every night. So what did you make of kind of the way that the themes are explored through this film?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is because there's like in some ways, like you're saying, there is just kind of like imagery or things that people are saying, and then on top of it, there's like she also sings in the church choir, and Robert Duvall and Sonny literally get baptized. Like
Yeah.
you like, and you see that because I know we skip a lot of things in Tender Mercies, but you actually see their baptism.
So there's that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it definitely like it lays it on probably a little thick, but I don't know. It's interesting because I was wondering about that, like in terms of the role of religion in this. It is very interesting. It is one of those things that you also feel like in some ways like it's very obvious, and in some ways you're like, oh, it could almost be explored more. Because from him getting to the point where he's not baptized, and I don't know what kind of church it is, but he's not baptized in whatever denomination that is, and then he gets baptized, like you don't totally see like the conversion there, and like he just kind of ends up getting baptized, and it's another thing that again gets kind of like plopped in. And I feel like you're saying, like there are moments where it's like, okay, like obviously this is like a film that is dealing with like kind of these like Christian themes, but in other ways you're like, I feel like this movie is setting them up and then not always exploring them in the most interesting ways. But I don't know, what do you think?
Right. Yeah. I think, well, first of all, I think that I can see why a large section, because there is a lot of people who do love this movie, you know, especially at that time. Not really, not really talked about much anymore, but you can understand why I think this is a treasured movie, because it does deal with these themes of redemption, you know, trying to be a better person, grappling with your past, you know, dealing with the goods and bads in life, trying to focus on the good. You know, I think that's the intention of the film, and that's what a lot of people get out of it. And I think for what it's worth, I think that is a particularly strong message that you can take from the film. It's not one of these things that works for me personally, but I don't know. I feel like I would have to do a little more digging into the film to explore whether it really gives that message, you know, strongly. But
like, it seems to be teeing these things up more than it is like actually coming out with like a theme or a message or something. Like, it feels like all these elements are like there, but they're like not at the surface yet. Like, they needed more time. Like, I don't know. They just need more time to like marinate or something, marinate in them, you know?
And I think, you know, an audience that's more receptive to that sort of message will probably see those things and take more out of it than other people would, or, you know, cynical people, non-religious people would. So
it's an interesting contrast to a movie, though, like Three Billboards, which is also in theory about like redemption and forgiveness.
Yeah.
I think between the two, if I had to give a hot take, I think between the two, I actually like the Tender Mercies approach a little bit more. Like, it, as much as I'm saying, I don't always feel like it's totally earned, or it feels like a little weird narratively. Like, I think that those problems are exacerbated even more in a film like Three Billboards. So at least like it is an interesting film to maybe pair with that, and kind of like a fun double feature on redemption.
God, yeah, that's heavy. But we can at least say Tender Mercies isn't quite as offensive to some groups as Tender Mercies is, which I don't think can really offend anyone, to be honest. So I don't know. So at the end, another thing I found interesting, going back to the Christian thing, is after the big crash has happened, which, by the way, I think kind of sort of comes out of nowhere and feels like a plot device that's just kind of thrown in to make things more interesting. Because it is very random. It doesn't seem to happen organically. Regardless, I did find it interesting how in the aftermath of that, Mac is really grappling with like the thing that a lot of Christians probably deal with at certain points in their life, of having doubts, having such doubts, as Meryl would say, of being like, why are all these bad things happen to me? It seems like nothing I can do is good enough, you know. I found that sort of kind of climax for him to be, it made sense, because he does have a lot of bad things happen to him.
I agree. I think it's more interesting with the mother, though, because she's like, I did everything for this kid. Like, I gave her everything she could have wanted, like, materially. Like, obviously, there seems to be a huge emotional gap between the mother and the daughter. But, like, she's like, I materially provided everything that I could. And she still seems at that point, because obviously it's right after the daughter dies. So obviously she hasn't fully come to terms with everything. But she seems to be very much like, what else could I have done? Like, what more could you have asked for from a mother? And I feel like that is also really interesting. Max is a little bit maybe more quiet and a little bit more understated, because he really hasn't been in his daughter's life for the past like decade or whatever. Whereas the mother has really been like, you know, an overbearing mother to some extent. And she's like, we'll get to this in another movie, but like, I did what I can and I still couldn't keep my daughter, which is obviously a theme. But like, it's an interesting, again, like, you wish that she had like half of this movie to explore how she's dealing with it as the parent who was there and who was providing for this kid, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Very well put. And the ending itself, I think, is predictable. It's something that I knew would happen as soon as
them playing catch?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's with the football.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw the football being placed on the kid's bed, I'm like, all right, this is going to end with them playing catch. He's the new father, redemption, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. And they play for like a very long time, I must say.
Yeah. It's like the last like 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah. It's like they were just stretching it out to make sure it got to 90 minutes.
Yeah. Like, it might not sound long, but when you actually have to watch it, it like goes on very long. You're like, oh, oh, this is still happening.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And it's not like the credits are being rolled. It's just like the same scene of just them going back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm happy for them. I'm glad that they found each other. They filled the role that they needed in each other's lives, which is wonderful. But when I can predict a movie that easily, I feel like, okay, well,
Yeah.
that's it. I can
And
turn
it's
this off
also
now.
one of those movies that very much like has to wrap it all with a bow at the end to be like,
Exactly.
obviously, like not to discount the fact that his daughter died, but like you're saying in this final moments, it's very much like Mac is now part of this new family, and obviously not as a replacement, but just like he still has things to live for. He still has people to live for, you know, and it's very much like neatly done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we haven't talked too much about the technical elements of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Did you particularly care for the direction, the visual style, the cinematography? I guess.
I think like whoever like did like the scene scouting, like location scouting, I think did a really good job. Like whoever finds that motel where they're living, now I don't know if the interiors are the same as the exteriors, maybe not. But like whoever set that up, I think did a really great job because it is this like tiny motel. It's like 3 buildings and you can't see I don't think you can see anything in either direction. Like you just see like one like every now and again one car will come by. That's presumably going to crash with the other car in town.
It always does. Cursed.
But I do think that whoever was choosing the locations did a really great job. I think the cinematography is decent. I mean, I think it's not the best cinematography, and you are in a location where it's going to just inherently have a lot of natural beauty to it.
Yeah.
I don't think the cinematography adds anything like super special to it, but it's nice to look at. I don't know. What did you think? I think the direction's a little uninspired though.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of the same thing that I felt with Driving Miss Daisy, which is that I feel like it's rather average overall, just in terms of the look of it, the camera movements, it's all very flat, like I said. And just to me, not entirely visually stunning. I can't really even pinpoint a single shot in this film that I found particularly memorable. So, meh. It's just kind of meh overall for me as far as the technicals.
It's not like in some ways it's almost like has the potential to be like a Terrence Malick wave shooting these like very expansive locales. Yeah, and it never totally gets there. Like a lot of things in this movie, it just like never totally like crosses that finish line.
You want
it sets it there, but it doesn't cross over.
You just want it to get there, and it's just like I don't know.
Yeah, this is very much the like road. Yeah, it's like the we were all rooting for you movie when you're like, oh my god, good, like you're getting somewhere, and then you're just like
2 steps back. All right. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't think this is a bad movie. Despite our complaints, I don't think this is actively a bad movie.
No, I agree.
I think it is kind of aggressively average, and that's sometimes more offensive to me than like a movie that I love or hate. It's just kind of a movie that leaves me in a meh sort of feeling that doesn't exactly make it very memorable. I guess Robert Duvall's performance is solid for what it is.
It's fine.
I mean, Betty Buckley gives me some good material here, but I just don't think, I mean, I know that it kind of helped inspire a lot of films like this many years to come, actually, including Crazy Heart.
Yeah, Crazy Heart's like such a direct like response to this movie, basically. Of like, we're just gonna update that. All right.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just didn't really find it particularly interesting. I mean, it's a tight 90 minutes.
Yeah.
If you want to watch it and just assess for yourself, there are still a lot of people that really love the movie and take a lot out of it. So that might be you, or you might be like us. So
tight 90, non-offensive, okay music every once in a while.
Yeah, exactly.
It has some things going for it.
And if you want to be like an Oscar completist, you could say, okay, now I've seen Robert Duvall's performance, Oscar-winning performance. Great.
Yeah. Or you could be me and see it twice.
Yes, because you love it so much.
I'm just constantly called to do Tender Mercies content. I mean, it's my calling in life, just someone needs a hot take on Tender Mercies, I'm there. I'm there in about 90 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And this may be the definitive discussion on Tender Mercies on the internet.
Yep.
Especially in 2018. Probably of the decade.
Here, folks.
Yep, exactly. So you're welcome.
Yep.
Okay. So when we come back, we will be discussing the Oscar track of Tender Mercies and why it lost Best Picture to a movie called Terms of Endearment.
Hey, mister. Were you really Max Sledge?
Yes, ma'am, I guess I was.
He was a star who reached for the stars and fell.
All she remembers about you is a mean drunk trying to beat up her mama. You're dead as far as she's concerned.
He was a star who reached for life through his songs, but never let life reach him.
When you gonna start singing again, sir?
I'm not gonna start singing again, son. I've lost it.
He was a star who loved and was loved, yet never learned to love himself.
I have a daughter.
You do?
She's 7 or 8 years older than your boy.
Where is she?
With her mama. Me and her mama are divorced.
Would you all stop talking? I can't get to sleep. What the hell are you doing here?
I was hoping to say hello to Sue Ann.
Harry, you right away. You stay away from her. You hear me? You stay away from her, or I warn you, I'll have the law on you.
Rosalie, are you jealous of Dixie Scott?
Maybe I am.
Why?
Well, because she's rich and famous and you used to be married to her.
What happened to your money?
I lost it.
How?
How? Too much Applejack. Would you think about marrying me?
Yeah.
You're the good things I threw away, coming back to me every day. You're the best it could ever be. You are.
And we're back. So now we're going to be talking about why Tender Mercies lost Best Picture to Terms of Endearment. So, Tender Mercies was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director for Bruce Beresford. He actually got it this time. Best Actor for Robert Duvall, Best Original Screenplay, and for the first time since The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, Best Original Song.
Wow, really?
Yes.
Like, this is your first runner-up since then?
Since then, yeah.
Wow, that's
kind of crazy. Yeah. So I'm a little excited about that.
Oh, because for 1988, you didn't do Working Girl.
Right. So anyway, yeah, for the song overview. Okay. So it won 2 of those, which were 2 big ones, 2 above the line, for Best Actor and Best Original Screenplay. Not too shabby for a film with 5 nominations.
Yeah.
So before the Oscars, Tender Mercies won the WGA Award. But meanwhile, Terms of Endearment won the Golden Globe for drama, DGA, and the WGA for adapted, on top of several critics' prizes like New York, Los Angeles, and the National Board of Review. So, Michael, why do you think Terms of Endearment won?
I mean, Terms of Endearment is just such like a tour de force from everyone. I mean, it's just one of those movies where you get everyone who's just like firing on all cylinders at that exact moment. And I feel like those movies are so few and far between, where it's just like everything was working for it. Like Jack Nicholson, Shirley MacLaine, Deborah Winger, who's like on such a hot streak, James L. Brooks in his first directing a movie. Like everyone is just working at such a high level. It's such a huge box office hit. It's super accessible. I mean, Tender Mercies, as much as I'm like, yeah, like it's average, whatever, I can see plenty of people coming out of that movie and not remembering it after just having watched it, you know? Whereas Terms of Endearment is much more, it leaves a lasting impression. It's obviously now considered much more of a classic film. So I think it just had so many things going for it that it was like such a juggernaut that I don't know if anything could have displaced it. I mean, especially not. And if something was going to displace it, it wasn't like the very quiet movie about like the recovering alcoholic. Like that was not going to be the movie to unseat this like critical and commercial hit, you know?
Yeah, this is one of these years where this was not really a race. So Terms of Endearment comes in with, I think, 11 nominations, which is like insane for a movie like this. It's not even like this big technical sort of blockbuster achievement. Like,
and it has like sound like nominations. It has like everything. Like people just lost their minds over this movie.
Yeah, it was like the movie of 1983 in terms of Oscars. We know that Return of the Jedi was the #1 movie of the box office, but as far as like an adult themed Oscar friendly movie, this was it. And that was it. like you said, there's really no competition there. I do understand, I think, why Tender Mercies might have appealed to people emotionally, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know, if there were, I don't know, certain men in the Academy who were like, I can't relate to this woman mother daughter relationship. I find more of interest in this aging country star. You know, there might be something to that, because they're both, I think, very emotional stories that you can maybe get invested in. But ultimately, I think Terms of Endearment certainly has that emotional payoff, especially at the end, which is still haunting to this day. Always a tearjerker. It's always brought up as one of the biggest tearjerkers of all time. And really, that relationship between Shirley MacLaine and Deborah Winger is so iconic. You know?
Yeah. And it's such like as many mother-daughter relationships are, it's just so complicated, and it's so filled with just so many ups and downs, where it's like they will be at each other's throats, and then the next moment Deborah Winger like needs Shirley MacLaine for something, she's there instantly, you know? So like it really dives into how complex that relationship is, that like these two people can be almost like leading the charge of like opposite armies into war, and then are also like still somehow love each other and still somehow like
still on the same side.
Right, ultimately on the same side. Thank you for finishing my metaphor. When I was like, I don't know how to finish this, I was like, I don't know what kind of term I would use to spin this one around, but yeah, are still on the same side at the end of the day, which I think is just, it's something that I think, not to keep mentioning Lady Bird, the first time was a joke, but I think Lady Bird does this too, where it's like those two characters are constantly butting heads, and then they'll have to go shopping for her prom dress and everything's fine, and then they will fight about something severely and like won't be talking to each other, and then everything's fine again. Like that's like how these relationships often play out. I feel like that movie is, I think Terms of Endearment especially, I think really tries to make that accessible to people who maybe didn't have that relationship themselves, didn't see like sisters go through it or something, you know? Right. So I think that it's a very accessible movie.
Yeah. And I actually think it's a film that has a lot of tonal shifts between drama and comedy, but I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing. You know, that's something that people say about certain films, like, oh, it's tonally, it's all over the place. But I think Terms of Endearment really nails down the blending of comedy and drama, and how these relationships can mutate over time and become this other thing while still always being connected to each other no matter what. I think it's just such a beautiful, realistic, true to life film.
Yeah, it just does such a good job of like, I don't know, just because it does what Tender Mercies doesn't, I think, where it like explains almost like why their relationship is the way it is through like showing you the like pivotal moments of like she's about to get married and Shirley MacLaine like the day before is like, don't marry this guy. Like it shows you all these like big moments in their life. Like even the first scene where she's constantly checking on the baby to make, when Shirley MacLaine's checking on not Deborah Winger, but just an infant, to make sure that the baby is still like breathing. Like you just like totally understand this relationship in a way that I think a movie like Tender Mercies tends to do a little bit more by like back-splaining and being like, oh yeah, that thing happened once. Like Terms of Endearment gives you like the whole arc of their relationship as much as it can in like a 2-hour movie, but it really does a good job of that.
Yeah, it's really a case of showing versus telling, which I think is really very present in this particular duo here. So
like even in the moment where when Deborah Winger passes, like when she like ultimately passes and she kind of looks at Shirley MacLaine one last time, and then her husband is asleep in the like her literal husband is sleeping and not even noticing that she's like dying, and Shirley MacLaine is like the last one that she has any connection with, and you're like, oh my god, this is saying so much without saying anything.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just so smartly directed. It's just phenomenal. You know, I think, and it is like those subtle little moments, like you just said, you know, without overly explaining exactly why this is so heartbreaking. You can just, you know, it's just too much.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie, and if people haven't seen it, like everyone just has to watch it at some point. And like I feel like we make it sound like such a tearjerker. The first like 90 minutes are like mostly very funny. Like it actually is like it's not like a comedy per se, but it's like very funny for
it's a dramedy.
And it has like a lot of really like hysterical laugh out loud moments, especially in the first 90 minutes. It starts to be a little more tearjerkery toward the end, but like the first 90 or so minutes, the first like 3/4 of it, you're like, yeah, this is great. Like everything's going so well. Like this is so funny. I'm having such a good time. And then you start to have more of a reflective, somber time, but it's still very emotional.
Exactly.
Very well earned.
And you can tell that this is coming from a director, James L. Brooks, who comes from television, who comes from comedy. You can really get the sense that this is someone who has, clearly has a knack for directing comedy. While also delivering what the best sitcoms do and delivering those heartbreaking moments at the end, So he was perfectly suited for this film, and very happy that he wins Best Director here.
Wins Best Director, wins Best Adapted Screenplay, wins Best Picture. Like he walks out with 3 Oscars.
Right, yeah. Just
good night for him.
Yeah, just like Alejandro G. Iñárritu.
Oh, yep.
With Birdman.
Our generation's James L. Brooks, some may say.
One person may say, and that is you just now.
Yikes.
Yeah. So it's the emotional investment. It's bigger. It was a huge box office smash. It was a phenomenon. And it has these 2 incredible performances at the center of it. So it was undeniable.
It really does. I mean, just Shirley MacLaine and Deborah Winger. I know that there's a lot of history between those 2 women and not always getting along on set. But I think it's this thing where often like they didn't really like each other by any account, by Shirley's account, by Deborah's account, anyone who would witness them,
the 2
Jack
parties
Nicholson's account.
Exactly.
But some like a lot of times like hate can be read as like love, and I feel like that really almost helped the fact that they actually like were at each other's throats, and still there's something that like you can sense there's something there, and like
exactly.
I think it ultimately wasn't super pleasant and it wasn't good feelings toward each other, but a lot of times those intense emotions are just, if you're reading it and thinking it has to be love, then you read it more easily as love. Just, I don't know, like hate and love, there's that like fine line that I think can come across as the same way. And I feel like this movie is just an entire exploration of that in some meta ways also because of what was happening off screen.
Exactly. It's just like the Fleetwood Mac making of Rumors.
Yeah, exactly though. Where you're like, oh, there's like a lot going on here. And then you hear the real stories and you're like, oh, but that informs so much of what they're trying. I don't know. It's just really interesting.
Yeah. Sometimes that's the best thing for you creatively is just being at each other's throats.
Yeah, like honestly. Though.
That amount of passion. Yeah. You really feel that.
And it's not like it was anything inappropriate. They just didn't like each other,
Right. Yeah.
Which, like, power to you. You don't have to like Shirley MacLaine. You don't have to like Deborah Winger. It's free country.
Yeah, exactly. No one's forcing you.
Yeah.
So we did get actually a few questions, multiple questions from Twitter about Terms of Endearment, especially involving the acting wins, because Shirley MacLaine does defeat Deborah Winger. They are both in the same category. One of the rare times that this has happened in the Best Actress category. So that's pretty significant. Well, this is from Jeffrey Kerr, who said, if Shirley MacLaine and Deborah Winger were not up against each other for Terms of Endearment, do you think Winger would have won for her performance? If so, which category?
Oh, like you would have to split them up.
Yes. How would you do it, and would Deborah Winger win?
I mean, I think Shirley MacLaine would probably still be the lead and Deborah Winger would probably be Best Supporting Actress. And I think if Deborah Winger were in Best Supporting Actress, I think she probably would have won.
Yeah. I'm going to say, regardless of how they are split up between lead or supporting, they both win.
Oh, that's a good point, because who else is really competing in Best Actress if not one of the Terms of Endearment, like either of the Terms of Endearment women?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
So I feel like regardless
of how
okay, thank you. Regardless of how you split it up, they both win. They both take home matching Oscars. Do they take a photo with each other? Who knows?
Who knows?
But yeah, I'm going to have to agree that probably Shirley MacLaine is still lead. I mean, she's still, the unwritten thing with Oscar campaigning sometimes is that like the bigger star, more well-known person tends to be in lead. Shirley MacLaine clearly has this Hollywood past behind her that Deborah Winger doesn't necessarily have. So, I mean, Deborah Winger was still kind of like big and,
But like in a rising star sense,
Exactly.
not in a like established, it's like Carol. It's like you're going to put Rooney Mara, even if Rooney Mara is arguably the lead, you're going to put Rooney Mara in supporting if you're figuring that out, So,
exactly.
Yeah.
I do honestly, at the end of the day, though, think they are both lead. So they made the right call either way.
No, I agree. And I feel like if you're Deborah Winger at that point, you might also be thinking, you're like, I'll win one of these. Like, I'm on such a hot streak. And like, Shirley MacLaine hasn't won since like 1959 or whatever her first nomination is. And you're like, I'll probably get one of these soon, It didn't happen yet, but,
There's still time, Deborah Winger.
Yeah, there definitely is.
So interesting. This is from Juan Carlos Ollano, who said, assuming Deborah Winger went supporting if Terms was released today, parentheses, when no two same-sex leads in a film were nominated in actress together since 1991, who would have been nominated in that fifth slot? So this would require looking at maybe Golden Globes, other critics.
Wait, so if one of them was supporting, who would take the fifth best actress slot is the question?
Yeah, they're saying if Deborah Winger was in supporting, who would have taken that leading spot?
Right. That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Maybe Streisand for Yentl, but
it's possible.
That got such a chilly reception that I'm like hesitant to say that like Yentl would get any Oscar love. I don't know. But that's like the thing that comes to mind first. Mary Steenburgen's also in like Cross Creek that year, maybe.
Right. Which gets 2 other acting nominations for
and she's an Oscar winner at this point.
Exactly.
So I feel like that could maybe work out. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the other possibility, just looking at the Inside Oscar book as well as the Golden Globes, is that Bonnie Bedelia was in the race for Heart Like a Wheel, which is this little small film about the first female drag racing champion. Not like drag queens, but like real drag racing. So probably her. She's the only one from the Golden Globe drama actress lineup to not transfer to Oscar. So there's that possibility. But I mean, maybe Barbara. I don't know if the Academy was. I mean, they clearly kind of iced Barbara out of the directing and Best Picture and writing. So
yeah. But I feel like they would also just be more comfortable with her acting. Like, she already has an acting Oscar. I feel like there was a lot of, I don't know. I feel like a lot of that came from notions of like, well, why is she directing it also? Why is she also, like, why is she doing all of it? Like, shouldn't a white man have one of these jobs? Like, I feel like there's like a lot of resentment like that. And I feel like acting probably would have been her best shot.
Yeah. Who does she think she is?
I know. How dare she?
Yeah. All right. And the other little question here is from Andrew Carden, who said, Streep, Walters, or Winger? Who was the runner-up to MacLaine? Parentheses, love you, Jane Alexander, but you were surely fifth.
Ouch. Okay. I mean, like, I would assume Deborah Winger.
I would also assume Deborah Winger if she was there. It's just saying who was the runner-up. So Shirley MacLaine would still win and be there. But
I think Shirley MacLaine won by a big margin, but I feel like Deborah Winger was like the people that were like, I don't know, just like she's having such a great, 4 or 5 years at this point.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to work with her. Like I'm sure that a lot of people would vote for her anyway.
Right. And maybe connected more to her character emotionally.
Yeah.
Than Shirley MacLaine, who's a bit like closed off for much of the film, But
yeah.
I don't know. I do think it's still Deborah Winger, but I do want to make mention of Julie Walters, who is in Educating Rita. First of all, she's a national treasure, an international treasure. And
first things first.
Yes. But that role, I still have not seen Educating Rita, but from the clips I have seen, that's like a very spunky kind of, actress role that tends to win in this particular category. That if they didn't want to go Terms of Endearment, she probably could have taken it because she also wins the Golden Globe for comedy and the BAFTA. So
she had some support, obviously. And Streep had just won the year before.
Right.
And already had 2. So I don't think that she was like anywhere near getting a third in a span of like 4 years or whatever, Yeah.
Even though I think that's a very great performance from her, but we will get to that later, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So the final question about Terms of Endearment comes from Charlie Bright, who said, if you don't find yourself crying by the end of Terms of Endearment, is that evidence of having no soul?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you cry?
Yeah.
I cry talking about it sometimes.
Yeah, like
how could you watch it and not cry?
I was getting welled up even you describing the end there.
Just like so much happens in that last 30 minutes when you're like, oh my God, my heart.
Yeah. And especially for me, that scene where Deborah Winger is talking to her kids. This time, I was just like, I'm not even someone who like ugly cries, quote unquote, at films. You know, I'll tear up, you know, but that was just like, forget about it. Like that was too much for me to handle.
And as someone who does ugly cry, it was like next level for me.
I'm sure it was like
it was like disgusting.
It was like scream crying.
Yeah, there are just some of those movies, in Terms of Endearment is one of them, where after that movie ends, you're just gonna have to cry into a pillow for 10 minutes, and that's just the way it is, folks. Like you sign up for this movie, that's what you gotta do.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah,
so,
it's very cathartic. It really
like
is.
when she's telling the son, when she's like, "Don't worry that you didn't tell me that you loved me in this moment. I know you did." And you're like, "Stop!
Please stop. We're done. We're moving on."
All right, go on.
Because this is too much. I'm gonna have to stop recording. Okay. So I wanted to talk about what I was mentioning in the beginning about another film that some people might argue was the runner-up, and that was The Right Stuff.
Yes! I love this movie.
Yes. Okay. So The Right Stuff wins 4 Oscars from 7 nominations, including film editing, original score, and the 2 sounds, which are very good, especially film editing.
Yeah.
Oh,
super well deserved.
But the thing about The Right Stuff, it does seem very Academy friendly, especially among this particular Best Picture lineup.
Go on.
But it was kind of a box office bomb.
Yeah.
We know this. And it also does not even get nominated for Best Director or Screenplay.
Insane. Also insane.
Yeah.
Especially Best Director. You're like, okay, the things that they're doing to show you what it would be like, what like John Glenn was going through, like the things that they are like like using practical effects to like show on film is like unprecedented and amazing, and just like, I don't know, throw the guy a bone, and instead you give it to Bruce Beresford for like showing you the plains or whatever it is, or the prairie. I don't know. That one, the directing really hurts. Directing hurts a lot.
Honestly, I've been talking about a lot of weird sort of director snubs over the course of this podcast.
Yeah.
This is by far one of the most baffling snubs I have ever seen in covering the past 35 years of Oscar history.
It's crazy.
But doesn't compute with me.
Correct me if I'm wrong. We also did this You're Not Her Again, but I'm not remembering, so I'm scrolling. But Ron Howard doesn't get nominated for Apollo 13, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I don't know what
what is it about these movies that people are like, oh, you thought that was gonna work? Like Ridley Scott for The Martian. That one's a little bit different because it's like a little bit more sci-fi than these are like telling true stories. But like, it's weird.
I don't get it.
Especially Apollo 13, what they did to achieve zero gravity, basically making everyone nauseous by like doing that crazy, plane zero gravity thing. And it's like, ooh, God, like throw him a bone.
Yeah.
Like, at least give him a Best Director nom.
It's just very bizarre to me. I mean, I imagine nowadays, like the past decade, we've seen a lot of these big technical achievements being honored. But for whatever reason, this year, they're just not having it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because now I feel like a lot of the Best Director wins for something like Gravity or The Revenant or Birdman. A lot of them are so tied to technical achievement. And that was like, you won't even get nominated if you have technical achievements like in the 80s and 90s. It's interesting.
So odd to me. Yeah. But The Right Stuff, let's just first of all, I just want to say that is why it's not the runner-up, in my opinion. Because I feel like if you're not going to get nominated for director or screenplay, then it's hard for me to really say, especially when it's a film on this level,
Yeah, so. That's really fair. That's a good point. Because when I was asked to do 1983, I was like, oh, I'm so excited to talk about The Right Stuff. And then you were like, it's Tender Mercies. I was like, no.
Tender Mercies, baby.
So I'm here under false pretenses. But that's a very good way of looking at it. If you're not getting director and screenplay, I mean, like, what's the last Best Picture to win or come close to winning that doesn't get those 2 nominations. Those are like essential, you know?
Right, exactly. So that's it's really just comes down to those sort of, I mean, on paper, that's what makes the most sense to me.
Yeah.
In addition to the fact that it was perceived as a bomb at the box office, which we know from the 80s and 90s, they love to award the big box office hits. So
yeah, that's fair.
So that's that. But as far as the film itself, you're very excited about it. So if you wanted to talk about it a little bit now, feel free.
Oh my god, yes. So The Right Stuff is about the space race. So it's kind of like, it's almost like vignettes where like you have Sam Shepard's in like a related movie, but slightly different because he is Chuck Yeager and he's trying to break the sound barrier. So that's kind of like the first portion of the film, and it continues, like you kind of check in on him to see how it's going. Yeah. But obviously what he's doing is related to obviously sending people into space. And then the other part of the film is trying to send John Glenn on, I think, obviously his first mission up into space. Because that guy he would just go up and like, he was like, I'll just go up again. So you never know John Glenn. But obviously, so it's like the story of these like astronauts, but it's told with a very light touch, which is probably didn't help with trying to get a Best Director nomination because it's like originally intended as a comedy for like John Belushi, and then they like kind of rework it, and the Chuck Yeager stuff falls out, and then it comes back in. Like it's very much this like weird movie that doesn't always totally know what it wants to be, which probably explains its running time of over 3 hours. But and like I'm the first person to be like, I love when a movie's 90 minutes, like it's perfect, like whatever, that's a great running time. This movie, like I know it's 192 minutes, but it's super engrossing. If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. It really portrays the astronauts less as like this very cerebral, dark thing, and more as this like almost these like cowboys that want to go into space, which I know sounds like stupid, but it's like very like charming, where they all just want to get into space and like they know the risks and they're all geniuses, but they also obviously to have the personality to be like, we're going to try to send humans into space. Do you want to be our guinea pig? To have that personality, you also have to be very like cocky and self-assured, and just like the dynamics between the different astronauts kind of jockeying for the positions to be the ones who get onto whatever mission, the relationships with their wives, just like I don't know, just all of the elements combined are just really interesting. There are a lot of really good dynamics. It obviously has time to explore it because it's 192 minutes, but it's not like a very dry, like, oh, okay, we're going to try and go to space. Like, here's like, you know, the math behind it, and here's like the science, and here's like people just being frustrated at their desk. It's very like fun and engaging in a way that I think maybe isn't always exactly true to what it was like, but in some ways it was like this frontier that they wanted to explore, and they're all just really excited to try and be the first one to go up and stuff. So it's a really good movie, but I don't know, what were your thoughts?
Yes, well, it is quite long. You could watch Tender Mercies back to back
like 6 times
and be done with one running of The Right Stuff. But I will agree, it has a lot of great moments in it, and that makes sense what you're saying about how it's kind of hobbled together in certain ways, about all the different storylines and things being dropped and brought in and tonal shifts and everything.
Yeah.
That's a little bit how I was feeling at certain points in this film, but I do agree that it was at the same time very engaging and really kind of subtly interesting about this idea of kind of masculinity and these guys who are just, like you said, jockeying for this position. And I also really connected a lot with the Sam Shepard storyline. I found it to be the most emotional part of the film, especially with the fact that, you know, this is a guy who is like the first person to break the sound barrier or whatever, first pilot. And, you know, but ultimately his lack of a college education kind of prevents him from being chosen to be in space. And, you know, his whole storyline is the one that I really was drawn to the most. So there's that. I mean, honestly, I didn't connect with it as much as others in this particular race, and I feel like that's a little bit of a hot take because I know a lot of people think it's kind of a classic, but I did kind of find myself going in and out of it at times because it's a long movie.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think that for me, part of it was, I think there are 2 things. One is that I went in with low expectations because I'm not someone who's super interested in like space movies or space exploration. Right. Like it's not something that I'm like naturally drawn to as a subject. And then the second thing, it's a very like male heavy cast, which usually for me is also not something that I'm like super seeking out. But there is some, like, this movie manages to be about masculinity in a lot of interesting ways without ever, I feel like, tipping over into something that's just like a full endorsement of like masculinity. I can't describe it, but I think it does a good job of towing the line between like masculinity that is like good and masculinity that can then be toxic. I think it does a good job of towing that line.
It's not too broy.
Exactly, like, because like they're broy, but they're also like nerds, because they also are like, to go into space you have to be genius. Like, they're not just sending up people there who like wouldn't know what to do. Things go wrong like all the time, and things in John Glenn's flight go wrong, like the heat resistance shield stopped working, so like you have to know what to do, and you have to like be really well educated and all that kind of stuff. So I will just really quickly say, sorry, I love this movie. I will just really quickly say Sam Shepard is a dream in this movie, and I wish he had won the Oscar. It was his only nomination. Yeah.
It's a beautiful cast.
It's a great cast. Ed Harris loves doing a good space movie. You see him, you're like, are we going to space or what? He's great in it, and playing John Glenn, one of the great Americans, and it's just a really well-rounded out cast. And then like Jeff Goldblum and Harry Shearer show up for like a really funny like side bit.
Great. I love that.
It's really well done overall, and it's a really interesting movie because it hit. Part of why they think it didn't do well at the box office was that it hit at the same time that John Glenn was trying to run for president, and he was running to get the Democratic nomination. So John Glenn at first was really nervous about the movie because he was like, shoot, like, I don't know what it's going to show me being like. And then he saw it and was like, oh, good. Like, we can use this.
Okay.
Like, I look great. Like, I come off as like really smart and really capable and like really hard worker. And then I think what the studio ended up thinking was like, people aren't seeing this movie because they think it's going to be political, because now John Glenn is like being called Mr. Right Stuff, and he's using it in his ads and all this kind of stuff. So people might think it's political, and it's not a political movie at all, really. So I think that that's kind of part of what could have maybe hurt it. Probably the 3-hour running time didn't help. But if you look back at a lot of the reporting back then, a lot of the studio sources were like, yeah, like, I think people are afraid to see it because they think it's going to be like very political, and they don't realize that it's just like this kind of feel-good story kind of.
So what you're saying is it's like First Man.
Yeah. Basically.
All these damn space movies being so political.
I know. Like, what is going on with that? I can't even.
Yeah. So speaking of that, this is a great lead-in. Thank you very much. Because
you're welcome very much.
Another Twitter question from San Diego Cinerama.
Okay.
Who said, is the cool box office reception The Right Stuff got really blamed for derailing the presidential bid of John Glenn?
I think it's seen as more vice versa. That I think the movie like helped him.
Yeah.
And then he hurt the movie.
Right.
Like, I don't think that it derailed him at all. I think that he was using it as much as he could, and he comes off as great. So if anyone did see it, which not many people did, but the people who did see it, I'm sure had a very favorable impression of him.
I would think so. But it's interesting because John Glenn himself said in his autobiography that the film had, quote, a chilling effect on his campaign.
I think it's almost like Perfect Storm, though, where it's like he had maybe more of a long shot than he realized. I think like whenever you start doing bad, you're kind of looking for things to be like, oh, like, why wasn't I like doing as well? Like, I don't think that it's necessarily the movie. Like, I think it's just naturally kind of also when his campaign was slowing down.
Right.
So,
I think it's a coincidence, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm like, I don't know if a movie showing you as like an American hero is like what's chilling your campaign. Like, there might be something else going on there that is like not helping.
That is not explored. Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. So yeah, The Right Stuff, a very big movie. But the other two movies in the Best Picture race are decidedly smaller in scope. We have The Big Chill and we have The Dresser, both of which I think, no, The Dresser is nominated for director. That's right. That's because The Right Stuff is not nominated. Okay. I always just naturally think that The Right Stuff is nominated for director.
I know.
But it is not. It is, yeah. So The Dresser is nominated for Best Director as well as 5 Academy Awards. It is essentially a stage play with a camera placed backstage.
100%. Yeah.
Obviously, it's based on a play. You can tell just immediately that it's going to be. Did you like The Dresser? I don't remember after listening to your thing from '83.
No.
Okay.
Walter really liked The Dresser, and he was like a big advocate. It's like fine. It's just not a movie that you're like, this was nominated for Best Picture and Best Director, and like 2 nominations for Best Actor. Like, it just has like so much Oscar love that you're like, what? I don't know. It's fine. I don't like it. I don't particularly dislike it. Like, it's whatever, but it's just not that interesting. I think Tom Courtenay does good work in it of the 2 men. I think Albert Finney's is definitely the like big boorish alcoholic kind of guy that like really has to show you that, like, especially in a transfer from stage where it's like, okay, like this has to be reeled in when it's a movie because now we can see everything very well and hear everything. I think Tom Courtenay does a better job at adjusting himself. I don't know if either of them were in the play, but I think Tom Courtenay does a better job of adapting the role. But not my favorite.
Albert Finney is really just playing to the backseat in this entire film, even when he's backstage, not even performing for people. Like, it is, wow, that is one of the most over-the-top performances I have ever seen that is nominated for an Oscar. He is just like at a 10 every single second of the film. So I don't know if we really got into exactly what it is about, but The Dresser, it's essentially, most of it is this behind the scenes of one night where it's this Shakespeare company who is, I guess, during World War II, I think.
Yeah.
And they're going to do King Lear. And then, Albert Finney is this.
Wait, I think it's Othello, isn't it? Because he puts blackface on.
Right, but the dresser, Norman, I should say, clarifies, we're not doing Othello.
Oh, you're right. Because I just remember seeing, sorry, I watched this movie a while ago, but yeah, I remember him in blackface, and I was like, woo, this movie took a turn.
Okay. Yeah.
I was not expecting this like little British movie to have blackface in it, but here we are.
I was not either, but that happened.
You're right.
Yeah. So it's King Lear, and I was kind of into it at times.
It's kind of like funny at points. Like, Tom Courtenay's very funny.
Yeah, I think for what it's worth, I think the choreography at the very least is very commendable for the amount of like crazy stuff. It's, I guess you could compare it to a Birdman sort of thing in a way where there's just so much going on backstage. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if it's totally Best Picture material, but it's certainly a really big acting showcase, especially for Tom Courtenay, who's kind of playing this effeminate dresser type, but I think he still manages to at least provide some depth of character.
Yeah. Would you say that he has the titular role?
Yeah, I would. I don't know if that can be disputed. So, yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
That's like a lot of these movies this year. I'm like, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay, so here we go. We're going to talk about The Big Chill. And this is where I'm going to give my hottest take yet.
Go for it.
Okay. Because what I do remember is you comparing The Big Chill and Tender Mercies.
Mm-hmm.
But
not like they're not exact one for ones, but parts of it.
But I absolutely love The Big Chill.
Do you?
That is my confession. I mean, I'm looking at like Letterboxd reviews of some of my film Twitter friends. A lot of them are like 3 stars, 3.5 stars, 2 stars. I'm like 4.5. Like, I am super into this movie.
You're like, is there a way to give 6 stars?
I've seen it multiple times. There is just something about this film that is just so fun to just like hang out with this particular group of people, like Glenn Close, Kevin Kline, Jeff Goldblum showing up again. How about that?
Shows up in a lot of them.
Yeah. William Hurt, Jo Beth Williams,
Kevin Costner as the corpse.
I mean, it's not like a super weighty movie, certainly, especially when you compare it to others in this race. And there's a reason it only gets 3 nominations, I think, which is kind of low for a Best Picture nominee.
Yeah.
But there's just something really just fun about it in like a hangout sort of way that appeals to me for whatever reason. It really just, the scene that crystallizes it for me is when they are in the kitchen making a dinner or something.
Yeah.
And like there's aluminum foil, they're making salads, Ain't Too Proud to Beg is playing, they're like bumping hips, they're dancing, and I'm like, yes, I'm all about this.
All right.
I don't understand why this film has this effect on me, but I'm just like in it
Heart
all
wants
the
what
way.
it wants.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. What's your take on The Big Chill?
I do just want to correct you. You called it a movie when it's really just a soundtrack. It's really just
a banging soundtrack.
It's just a lot of music that then has like video, like interstitials.
Maybe it's a 2-hour music video.
Yeah, like
regardless.
Arguably. To me, it's just like a movie that is like Much Ado About Nothing in a way, where it's like it has an interesting premise, I guess, of like disaffected people coming, like a reunion. They went to school in like the 60s or whatever, and they come back in the 80s for their school or not a school reunion, but all of their friends get back together because one of the friends has, did he commit suicide or did he die? Okay, suicide. Committed suicide. So it has like an interesting premise. It's just one of those things that I think also has a lot of like Tender Mercies. It does a lot of the backfill where it's like, okay, like here's this relationship. By the way, like during college, like this thing happened between these two people. Like there you go. And I don't know. It feels like a lot of missed opportunities where it's a lot of like telling that kind of stuff. A lot of it. I also have a general aversion to things that are like overly baby boomer in a way. Like I'm just like I don't want to spend that much time with a bunch of baby boomers being like, wasn't it great in like the 60s and like what, and now they're all like these yuppie, like I don't know, like it's not like exactly the group of people that I want to be hanging out with. I think like Glenn Close is fine in it, like William Hurt is fine in it. They're all like fine in it. It just never really adds up to anything that I find super compelling. I think it has like an interesting. The first part is like, oh, that's an interesting concept to bring these people back to see where their lives have gone, especially because it's obviously a pre-social media era. So it's like you don't know everything that your friends have been up to unless you were literally calling them. Like, you know, like you wouldn't actually know what a lot of these people have been up to. So that's like an interesting thing to explore. I just don't think the film for me does a really good job of actually exploring those dynamics.
Okay, well, that's fair. I do love the beginning sequence where it's like set to I heard it through the grapevine, and it's just this extended little sequence at the funeral. Everyone's meeting again. I love
so much music.
This
budget must have been insane for the music because they play like every song imaginable.
It is the greatest hits of your dad's favorite music.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of dad
or
radio.
Your mom. Yeah, but honestly, it's just such a. I mean, I know you say you don't like hanging out with these people. Personally speaking, I want to be friends with them. They seem cool. They have like affairs with each other, and they divulge secrets. And there's just something about the premise of like all of them coming together for a weekend after all these years. They're all self-contained in this one big house, and they're all kind of going off and doing all these things that I just found to be weirdly compelling. So,
I like Mary Kay Place in it. She's the one who's the lawyer, right?
Yes.
And she tries being the public defender, and then she like sells out because she's like, the system's so broken, I might as well just make money.
Yeah.
And I think she has a very interesting story that I think because of the ensemble nature, you don't get a lot of time with each kind of person. But hers, I was like, ooh, I want to dive into that because that one seems interesting. And she also has a voiceover role in Terms of Endearment. So Mary Kay Place is having a good year.
There you go. A banner year for Mary Kay Place.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just my little hot take is that I think it's a great film.
Yeah. Well, it got 3 nominations, so.
Yeah.
A segment agreed. Yeah, there was some contingent of Academy voters that were into it.
I'm not a baby boomer, clearly, but in spirit, I can feel them, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so let us move on to our Should Have Been a Contender segment. And that is other movies from 1983, including other Oscar nominees that we particularly like. So, Michael, let's talk Silkwood.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Silkwood, Meryl Streep's coming off a hot Oscar win, Sophie's Choice, which was coming off of another hot Oscar win with Kramer versus Kramer, having a banner 80s. She will go on to have banner 90s and 2000s, 2010s. But
banner career.
Yeah. So Silkwood tells the true story of, I think Karen is her first name, Karen Silkwood, who works at this like nuclear plant in Oklahoma and starts to believe that she does work with these like radioactive chemicals, but starts to believe that she and others at the where she works are being poisoned. And as she starts to like investigate this and kind of complain about this because she keeps being found with like all of this. I forget what the exact chemical is, but she keeps being found with, let's just call it radiation. She keeps being found with like traces of this radiation, like some kind of like isotope on like everything. Like it's in her house, which seems unusual. It's like all over her clothes. Like it's everywhere. And she can't escape the feeling that like there might be something, because she was a little bit of like an agitator at work, not just like goes along with anything, that she's being like poisoned by the corporation. So as she like investigates it, that's like the professional storyline, and it's a true story. And not like she's not like Nancy Drew, but she's just like, you know, trying to figure out what's going on. And then there's the like maybe secondary storyline of she lives with her roommate, played by Cher. She lives with her like live-in boyfriend. She has kids from a previous relationship that she does not have custody of and only gets to see intermittently. But it's just it's directed by Mike Nichols, written by Nora Ephron, and a co-writer whose name I can't remember right now. But it's a very interesting movie. It is a very like kind of what we were talking about, like tonally, like how a lot of these movies have like tonal shifts. It's a movie that in some ways kind of just plays as like a regular drama, but some of the elements of the radiation play like a horror movie. Like people have probably heard of like Silkwood Shower. Like whenever it's detected, whenever this element is detected on you, you have to go into this like shower where you're scrubbed like relentlessly, and it's like very painful, very humiliating. And it's like very like when it starts happening throughout the film, like the more times it happens, it like you feel so much dread and anxiety, like when you hear like sirens go off, because you realize that she has to get one of these like cleansing showers. And Mike Nichols does a really good job of like having this like drama like go along, and then also having these like, again, like almost like horror elements where whenever those like sirens go off, you're like your heart starts beating faster, and it's a very viscerally like you feel the fear of this woman.
Yeah, exactly. Those particular like shower scenes, just like traumatizing, just horrifying. It's really, really well directed. I'm glad that he got a director nomination. That is one of the one-offs where Silkwood does not get nominated for picture, but it does get a director nomination, as well as writing, as well as 2 for acting and film editing. So we can clearly say that this was probably the number 6 film in this particular race. Sadly.
Which is weird, because it's such it was like critically acclaimed. They campaigned hard. It was Meryl Streep. Like, it's like weird that it came up short, especially in the 80s, where it's like, that is like her thing, you know?
Right. This seems like very much up the Academy's wheelhouse or whatever.
It really does. That's why it's so confusing. And also, wait, I just want to say that it was Nora Ephron and Alice Arlen. I wanted to get her name, who co-wrote the film.
Good. Yes. Yeah. Incredible pedigree there. Kurt Russell is also great in the film.
So good.
Yeah.
Kurt Russell's just like very underrated, and maybe he was like best supporting actor that year, like that kind of category, but I don't know why he didn't get in, because
he was nominated for supporting actor at the Golden Globes, but that did not translate. I think that Silkwood is a fantastic film. It does do those tonal shifts very well. I think Meryl gives one of her best performances, honestly. I think
Silkwood is definitely up there.
Yeah, I mean, like, if she had not won for Sophie's Choice, I would not have minded her winning for this. Maybe like away from the Terms of Endearment women, if like, Silkwood came out like next year or something, then I would have been down for that for sure.
It's almost like an Erin Brockovich story, but like a woman that doesn't have the resources. So it's like she has to do it herself. Like you can probably guess that she doesn't have a lot of education. Like she doesn't have a lot of like financial resources at all. Like she's living with a roommate. Like she's not, she can't just hire a firm to like look into this, Right. So it's very just tragic watching her try and figure out what's happening to her and why she's getting sick. And, it's a really good movie. It's very haunting. It's really great. I would recommend it if you haven't seen it. I don't want to say what happens at the end in terms of like the actual like filming, like the choices that Mike Nichols makes, but they're really interesting. But I assume people haven't maybe caught up with it in the way that if you're listening to this episode, you probably have seen Tender Mercies or you don't care as much. I think Silkwood I would like to leave to be like, watch that movie, and the ending is just really, really powerful.
Yeah, I have to say, I did not know the real story, honestly. I tried to stay away from that. When I found out what happened at the end, I was like, oh, wow, okay. That is...
And he just like shoots everything so beautifully.
Yeah.
Like, Mike Nichols, a great directing nom.
Yeah, very inspired. Yeah.
But I'm glad Cher did not win for this because I am glad that she won for Moonstruck. I think she's very good in Silkwood. I think that Moonstruck definitely plays more to her talents, though.
For sure. Yeah. And this really felt like her big take me seriously type of role.
Yeah.
Silkwood. And she always tells this story about how, like, I don't know if you know about this, but when people were watching Silkwood, like she was, you know, in some sort of screening of it or something with regular people. And when her name came up in the opening credits, everyone just laughed because it's like, oh, it's Cher. It's this, you know, goofy music person that we know. And now she's in this big dramatic role. What is this going to be like? And then she says, you know, by the end, when her name came up, people started to cry.
Yeah.
So isn't that beautiful?
It really is, though, because she does a really good job in this movie. Again, I think Moonstruck is definitely like the definitive Cher performance, so I think it all kind of worked out in the end. But you know, she was like the woman that would dress crazy and like always had these like was more of a pop star than or a TV star than a movie actress, you know. So it's a really interesting breakout role because it's also like a supporting role in like a Meryl Streep movie, which at that point in 1983 is very much a thing, like a Meryl Streep movie. So I don't know, it's a very interesting role, and I'm glad that she got recognition for it, and I'm glad that people continue to work with her after they saw what she could do and was capable of as an actress.
Mm-hmm. And who knew 35 years later that they would be reunited again in a little movie called Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again.
Oh my God, I can't wait to do the episode on whatever that loses Best Picture to. I can't wait to do the runner-up episode.
Yes. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that they're playing mother and daughter in that film is...
I know.
I will never get over it.
I know. It's movie magic, folks.
Yeah. So, yeah, Silkwood, highly recommended. Let's talk about one of the bigger, I guess, Oscar stories of this year, which is Yentl.
Oof.
That is Barbra Streisand's big directorial debut. I guess you could say another big take me seriously type of narrative for her. She directs the film, she co-writes the film, she stars in the film. It's this big passion project that takes years to make. And she kind of gets iced out, as I said earlier, to some of the bigger awards here, which was actually a big shock, according to like, you know, a lot of the people writing about the Oscars at that time. It was really kind of written about as a big slight against her and against women.
Yeah.
To not be nominated for a director.
Especially because at that point, not that it's good now, but at that point, only one woman had ever been nominated for Best Director, you know? Like, that number has barely changed, but like, you know, especially then.
We are still in the single digits.
No, exactly. So, you know, it's still dire, but especially in 1983, I think it was very much seen as, you know, women just cannot like break into this directing club, you know?
Yeah, it's a boys' club. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Yentl is a very interesting film. Have you seen Yentl?
I've only seen a stage production. I've never seen the actual movie.
Okay.
Yeah. So I know the story.
Okay, yeah. It's wild. I mean, honestly, we've been talking so much about tonal shifts in this episode, but like every time it goes from like the super dramatic, intense scenes to Barbra Streisand just belting out this 4-minute ballad is just
Papa, can you hear me?
Whoa, okay, yeah. The way he makes me feel, yeah. I mean, they're nice songs and everything, but I don't know if I'm gonna get like hate for this. I know there's a lot of Barbra fans listening, but there's Barbra haters as well. So either way, I'm gonna push somebody's button. But I just find the shifts and the musical numbers to be really not helping the film and the narrative itself.
Interesting.
So that's kind of my take on that. I mean, I also think that the idea of her dressing up as a man and then like not changing her voice at all, you know, just still sounding like Barbra Streisand.
Like maybe a little too conspicuous.
Yeah. It's just like, okay. And everyone just like believes that she's a man. I will say Mandy Patinkin is very good looking in this film.
Oh, is he in that?
Yeah, he is kind of the male lead. Yeah.
Really? Oh, good for him. Getting work off of Broadway.
Yeah, he is. And he doesn't even sing in the film, which is like, okay.
Yeah, what a waste. Yeah.
Yeah. All the music is reserved for Miss Streisand. So
sure. You do what you got to do.
But Amy Irving is the one person who gets an Oscar nomination among the actors for Yentl. She kind of plays this girl who is sort of stuck between Mandy Patinkin and Barbara Streisand in a weird way. She's kind of like an ingenue type of performance that isn't really that flashy or memorable to me, but I mean, I guess she's not bad. It's fine.
Well, she's the only person to be nominated for the Oscar and the Razzie for the same performance, right?
She's one of two. Yeah.
Oh, who's the other?
I already forgot.
Do you think that she was like good and more good than bad?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't think she's in any way bad. So I think that particular Razzie nomination is more of maybe sending some sort of gross message to Barbara Streisand. Like, your movie is just horrible, you know?
Yeah, I think like, you know, the people protesting her snub, like, they had valid points. Like, look at what is going, like, why is this like woman who directs this thing? And listen, you like it, you don't like it, but like, this is what people are calling like the worst acting. It's such a weird thing.
Yeah, it just.
And by weird, I mean unsurprising, because the world is disgusting. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. It just left a bad taste in my mouth, kind of reading about that. The way that this film was treated. I mean, I don't think it's the best movie in the world. I probably wouldn't have even nominated it for director, but I just really feel for Barbara and how she had this vision of hers that she felt so strongly about for so many years. And then, I mean, people do like the film. It does get some nominations, but the way it's treated with such this intense scrutiny is pretty indicative of what a lot of female directors have had to deal with forever.
It's like you have to be twice as good, otherwise no one's gonna pay attention.
Backwards and heels. Yeah.
Exactly. And it does lead to some great universe karma, though, because when Catherine Bigelow becomes the first woman to win Best Director, the woman handing it to her is Barbara Streisand. Exactly. So there is some, you know, the arc of justice is longer. Like things do come back. So, you know, at least she had that moment.
Yeah. And it's so funny because like it's not only that year, like she presents like a lot of Best Director awards at the Oscars for whatever reason, which I find kind of interesting. I feel like this is something that has really stuck in her craw a little bit. This idea of being recognized as a director. I mean,
I don't blame her.
She only
if I were her, I'd feel the same way. I'd be like, I'll show up and give your award. I'll make everyone remember what they've done to me.
Exactly. You will see my face and you will recognize what you've done.
I don't blame her at all. I'd be like, girl, I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I already answered this Twitter question from Cody Derricks, which is asking about the Amy Irving Oscar Razzie situation and which I think deserved more. Certainly Oscar more than Razzie. Yeah. I just think that was a weird personal vendetta.
Yeah.
But did you have any others you wanted to mention?
Nothing that really comes to mind. I mean, it's like the year of Return of the Jedi. I kind of like that as a Star Wars movie more than I think other Star Wars people tend to like it.
It's very goofy.
Yeah, like I kind of like the goofiness of it, but but also to clarify, I like the original cut, not the one that has like Hayden Christensen then like superimposed. And,
God, yeah.
That is obviously terrible. Other than that, like there are movies that I've yet to see that might change my mind. Like I know Fanny and Alexander.
Yes.
That might be a movie that you might want to talk about. But
correct,
like
it is.
Yeah, so go for that because I don't really have anything else. I'm like, I don't know, Silkwood.
Silkwood again.
Yeah.
Can we talk more about Silkwood actually?
I know, I'm like, oh God, I'm leaving some good Silkwood fun facts behind, but let's forge ahead, I guess.
Yeah, so Fanny and Alexander is the other film that is nominated for director that is not nominated for picture. Fanny and Alexander gets 6 nominations, which is very good for a foreign film, I must say.
That's like 4 hours long.
Yes, that too. Yeah.
Like we thought The Right Stuff was long. Like Fanny and Alexander is longer than The Right Stuff.
It is quite long. There is an intermission at one point.
I
So
love a good intermission. People should do
Yes.
that more.
yes, when that came on the screen, I'm like, perfect. Yes. Okay. But yes, Fanny and Alexander, Ingmar Bergman, obviously a lot of respect for him. So it's no surprise that he gets into director. Just quickly about the Oscars. As far as Best Picture, some people may be surprised that it was not nominated there, considering how well it does, including winning 4 Oscars.
Yeah.
But this is from Gordon at Mark Wahlberg. I just wanted to cover this first. With so many noms and wins, why do you think Fanny and Alexander ultimately didn't make the cut for Best Picture? Okay, so I did a little bit of digging for this, and I noticed a New York Times article that said Fanny and Alexander, because it is a foreign film, was not eligible for Best Picture. And I was kind of looking to like cross-reference that to see if there was some sort of rule about that, because I don't remember anything like that changing over the course of Oscar history about foreign films. We had seen foreign films nominated before and after, but I mean, I don't want to doubt the New York Times, but like
that is interesting.
Yeah.
The only other thing I could think of is like maybe it did like because it was a foreign film submitted that year as a foreign film and didn't have like a Los Angeles release in time.
Maybe. I don't know.
But yeah, that seems weird.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it did make money at the box office in the US, so
yeah, like it was released here at some point.
Yeah. So I don't really understand that. But I mean, honestly, looking at this, I guess if it was eligible, if we're going with the narrative that it was not eligible, then it probably would have snuck in over The Big Chill for one. So that's what I would say for that. I mean, it's actually hard to say between that and Silkwood what would have had a bigger chance, but I just feel like the amount of respect for Ingmar Bergman probably would have gotten that in first. But
I would just want to clarify that I think I'm wrong because I think it had open in time. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe like I don't know what was going on there.
I don't know. But so this film is very intense, I must say, as a lot of Ingmar Bergman films are. It's this historical like period drama film about this upper class theater family.
Sure.
The first half of it is very much just like this ensemble piece where there's a lot of these different interacting storylines between this big family. And then there is a big death that happens in the family, and it really splinters everyone. And this mother who Fanny and Alexander are these siblings whose father dies, and so the mother goes to marry someone else, and they are kind of an abusive parent. The rest of the film is kind of about Alexander in particular really trying to prove how awful this new guy is. And a lot of haunting imagery, very symbolic, very beautiful. I think all the nominations it got are deserved. It is a time commitment, as these things are, but I think it's definitely worth it.
It sounds more like narratively conventional than some of his other movies.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. I mean, at the same time, it is kind of like I said about like two very different films between the two intermissions. Or, I think it's actually one of his more accessible films, to be sure. So I would definitely check it out. I found it at my local library. So
yeah, and it's also on by the time this episode comes out, it's on Filmstruck if you have like the Criterion Collection like plus subscription, which I do not. But if you do, you can watch it there as well.
Right. We did just hear word that Criterion is making its own streaming service now. So that will come out in the spring, from what I understand. So whenever that comes around, put Fanny and Alexander at the top of your list. Yeah, really, really haunting film. Let's see.
I mean, imagine if you came out of an Ingmar Bergman film and you were like, it's the funniest film of the year. Everyone would be like, what?
Hysterical?
Yeah. Best motion picture, musical or comedy, locked up.
What a hoot. Yes.
Yeah.
But speaking of comedy, I just wanted to mention a few little lighthearted films.
Go for it.
That were in this year. Not really anywhere close to Oscar recognition, but Monty Python's The Meaning of Life.
Never seen it.
Okay.
Take your word for it. Sounds funny. I'm laughing already.
Sure. It's one of these kind of sketch comedy things that's kind of in segments about literally just describing the meaning of life from birth to death. Lots of really over-the-top funny sequences. There's this one sequence that everyone knows that involves this morbidly obese man who just starts vomiting everywhere. That was just a bit traumatizing as a child. But
it's a bit traumatizing now. I'm hearing it. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. I feel like this is not a Michael Domanico film.
Probably not.
To be fair. But
hey, what does that mean? As you're like, talk more about Silkwood. I'm like, oh, okay.
It's humorous. If you're into the Monty Python thing, it's one of the better ones.
I've only seen Life of Brian.
Up
there, film work.
Not even Holy Grail?
No. Wait, is that not the one that you were just talking about? What was the one you were talking about?
The Meaning of Life.
Oh, okay.
That's 3 different ones we're talking about here. Okay.
Sounds good.
Anyway, so another just quick one, just because it's something that's my family likes to watch now and again, is Christine, a Stephen King adaptation about the car that's
a
demon. I mean, it's fine for what it is. It's just one of these things I wanted to mention because it means something for my family, I guess.
Yeah. Who's in that movie?
I don't even know if there were any big stars, but the car is what counts.
The car is the star. That's what the poster
car
said.
is the star. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on Silkwood?
No, I think I've said my piece.
Okay. Well, it's an interesting year, certainly. I don't know if it's, again, one of these years that a lot of people look back on the Best Picture nominees and are like looking back fondly.
Yeah. And like, if anything, not just like in the circles that I think I run in, but I also do think Silkwood has probably had a little bit more of a shelf life than Tender Mercies or The Dresser. Yeah. Like, I think people would tend to recommend Silkwood more readily than they would The Dresser, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. Like when I said I was watching Silkwood on Twitter, everyone was like, yeah, Silkwood.
Yeah.
And then I post like a picture of The Dresser and it's like 2 likes.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I get
so
the
it is one of those
here.
things where it's like time kind of chooses its own winners.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. So when we come back, we will be delivering our verdict. Can't wait to hear what we say about whether Terms of Endearment deserve that Best Picture win, or maybe in the course of this discussion, we decide, hey, maybe Tender Mercies deserved it more.
And now, the 5 nominees for the Best Picture of the year are The Big Chill, a story of the 1960s ideals coming face to face with the realities of the 80s after a young man takes his own life. A Carson Productions group production, Columbia, Michael Schamberg, producer. The Dresser, a Shakespearean touring company, holds fast to its love of language and traditions of acting in the England of World War II. A Goldcrest Films World Film Services production, Columbia, Peter Yates, producer. The Right Stuff, the story of America's entry into the space program of our first 7 astronauts and their early successes and failures. A Robert Chartoff, Irwin Winkler production, The Ladd Company, through Warner Brothers. Tender Mercies. An out-of-luck country singer in Texas finds a second chance for love, for family, and for his music. An EMI presentation of an Antron Medium production, Universal, AFD. Philip S. Hobel, producer. Terms of Endearment. 30 years in the lives of a mother and daughter. 30 years of the bitter and sweet. A James L. Brooks production, Paramount. James L. Brooks, producer. And the winner is... That's nice, isn't it? The winner is Terms of Endearment.
And we're back. So now we are going to be delivering our verdict as to whether Terms of Endearment deserved that Best Picture win, or maybe if Tender Mercies deserved it more. Michael.
It's tough.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna have to say that I think Terms of Endearment should have won and rightfully won.
Brave.
I'm so brave.
That's, wow, what a stance. Yep.
I know.
Well, I'm going to have to heartily agree with that.
Yeah. Please don't tweet at us for our unpopular opinions. We get it. We get it.
Coming into our mentions, all you Tender Mercies fans, I see you.
Yeah. But I think it's a pretty clear winner.
Yeah. Brilliant film. Much better than Tender Mercies. I blanked on the name of the film. I'm just like, I'm done with it now.
You're like, the one where the mercy was tender? What was that one?
Yeah. So like we've been doing for the past 2 episodes, I wanted to now expand it out to all of the Best Picture nominees. To say whether we still think Tender Mercy, or whether we still think Terms of Endearment, they both start with T, whether we still think Terms of Endearment should have won. What do you say?
I would still give it to Terms of Endearment, but I do think The Right Stuff is like maybe not like a close second. Like Terms of Endearment is still the movie I prefer more, and the movie I think is overall better done. But I do think The Right Stuff is a strong second for me.
Fair
but
enough.
I would still give it to Terms of Endearment.
Yeah, for me, it's still a very clear 100% Terms of Endearment.
Yeah,
I don't think any of these movies really come close to the emotional impact of that. So, actually, I'm just going to give my quick ranking of the Best Picture nominees because why not give more people reason to tweet at me? I already said my hot take for the episode, so I bet you know what's coming here. So my number 5 is Tender Mercies. I'm very sorry. My number 4 is The Dresser. That's pretty clear bottom for me. Number 3 is The Right Stuff.
I saw that coming.
Number 2 is The Big Chill. Yeah. And number 1 is Terms of Endearment.
Yeah, that's a fair ranking. I mean, I would swap all of those, but that's a fair ranking for you. That's what makes the world go around. I think. So I actually listened to my 1983 episode to be like, I should be consistent. And now I'm like, no, I'm changing my mind. Oh. I think that in the 1983 episode I did for Not Her Again, I put 5. I tied Tender Mercies and The Dresser at like a 4 spot because I was like, I don't know, like take it or leave it. I think I would now say 5 for me is The Dresser, 4 Tender Mercies, 3 Big Chill, 2 Right Stuff, 1 Terms of Endearment. I think Tender Mercies improved a little bit just because I knew what it was going to be.
Okay.
Going into it, and I think The Dresser, maybe if I watched that more recently, I would be like, oh, that was good too. But I don't know. The Dresser left like a little bit more of a bad taste in my mouth. I think Tender Mercies is just a little bit, it's boring, and that's why I didn't like it. But I'm like, I'll give it that little edge over The Dresser.
Yeah. So it's not quite as actively offensive to you.
Yeah, exactly. Like so it's just like more benign. It's just like there. I'm like, yeah, 4th.
Right. Like you can't hate it, you know?
Yeah. Like it is what it is.
Yeah. So the final thing, we open it up again. We say any other movies from 1983. Do we still say Terms of Endearment?
I mean, as much as I love Silkwood, Terms of Endearment is a better movie overall. So Silkwood is like definitely, if it were in the race, would probably be a number 2.
Yeah.
But I think that, Terms of Endearment, it's just, it makes sense why it won. Like sometimes you hear about movies and you look back and you're like, this won all these Oscars. And then Terms of Endearment, you're like, this won all the Oscars? This is great.
Great,
you know? So I think it's one of those years where it's a very nice thing that Terms of Endearment kind of swept.
It's a good populist win, I think. In a good way, yeah. I will agree. I will actually say Fanny and Alexander comes close for me because I think that is such an affecting film. But I do think that Terms of Endearment just is such a classic that I can't possibly pick anything else. So once again, I am deciding that the Best Picture winner was absolutely correct for both this year and the next year with Amadeus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Amadeus one, that's an interesting year, too.
Yeah.
The whole, like, I don't know. I feel like you can get so many, the 80s Oscars are so, I feel like almost like polarizing. Like, you can get so many, I don't know, hot takes on all of these movies because they're all just, like, they're, in some ways you can see what was going on in the 80s in terms of like these big historical things, but then you also have a movie like Terms of Endearment thrown in there, or like Tender Mercies. I don't know, it's a very interesting kind of period to be looking at. And I think that Terms of Endearment is also just important to flag in the Terms of Endearment episode. That's like, when was the last time that a movie that had 2 female leads won Best Picture? You know, like, I don't think there's been a movie since that has won that has 2.
I guess if you count Chicago. But
yeah, I don't know. I think Richard Gere.
Yeah,
I'm like, that one kind of dilutes it for me because that's he has like a big part in that. So I feel like a movie that genuinely has 2 female leads and every man is supporting, much in the way that most movies are, but flipped. Like that just like doesn't really happen. And there are movies that are like female like led, or like $1 Million Baby or something like that, but it's still like having just 2 women really at the center in like a Thelma and Louise way, like that. Those movies don't really win Best Picture.
Yeah. So it is definitely a good anomaly. I wish that, again, there was more of this sort of thing, because even 35 years later, all these films are 35 years old. So that's kind of crazy.
God, really? That's how long ago this was? Wow.
Yeah.
Not very good at math.
That it's the fact that it's been so long and we really have not seen anything like Terms of Endearment win again is a little bit damning. But
yeah. And it's like not only win, but even nominated. It's like
yeah,
hard to even think of that.
Or like get made.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I'm very, very, very happy with how the 56 Academy Awards kind of panned out for everyone.
Amen. Yes. So thanks again, Michael, for this elaborate, wonderful, crazy chat, as always.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was a joy.
Yeah, I bet you didn't think you could have this fun with an episode about Tender Mercies.
I know, right? Like, I'm just like, how do I keep getting enlisted into watching Tender Mercies? I know the first one I did it to myself, but now I'm like, am I the person people call for Tender Mercies content? Like,
well, you definitely will be now.
Like, what niche am I establishing? Because it is like not like these are not the choices I wish I had made.
Well, you got to go with what you know best.
Yeah, it is what it is. You know, you got to work with what you have.
Yes. So tell the people where they can find more of your stuff on the internet.
So you can follow me on Twitter at Kate Blanchett with 4 T's, 5 if you count the first T. You can follow my podcast, Not Her Again, at Not Her Again Pod. Our first season, we did all the years that Meryl Streep was nominated for an Oscar but lost, which is why I'm here, because she lost for Silkwood. So we kind of do like all of those Oscar years, so from 78 to 2017. With skipping over 79, 82, and 2011. And then the last season we just did, which is kind of wrapping up, we covered the career of Julia Roberts. So on our future episodes, we'll have coverage on Homecoming, we'll have Ben is Back, we'll probably be doing some Oscar stuff, and then we have a bunch of episodes in the backlog. If you want to hear Kevin on one episode, he is on the he's on the Stepmom Erin Brockovich episode. Because I'm a nice person and I gave him Erin Brockovich, and then he gave me Tender Mercies and Birdman. So do with that what you will. But so if you want to check those out. To be fair. and Terms of Endearment, which obviously a great movie. But yeah, so if you want to check out our episodes, all of the regular episodes are released, and we'll be doing just some kind of Oscar-y stuff. So that is where you can find me.
I wonder who you'll be covering next.
Ooh, I know. We'll talk about it off mic because I want to run something by you.
Okay. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Jacobson. The podcast is at Oscar Runner Up, and the show is on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play. Rate, review, subscribe. And now I will leave it up to you listening at home to decide whether you think Terms of Endearment deserved to win, or if Tender Mercies should have taken it. And you could do that at my website at filmtrophies.com, or email me at filmtrophies@gmail.com. So once again, thank you, Michael.
Thank you. And I also just want to say that this podcast has been very fun to listen to the evolution of, because I like that it's going like backwards. It's a really interesting way to think about it, that you're going like you started with the most recent movies and now you're in the 80s. Like, I don't know, it's fun to see kind of how the runner-ups change, the types of movies change. So it's been a very interesting ride, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, time's a flat circle.
Yeah, really.
And I will bid you all adieu.
Bye, everyone.